This is the first ever restricted-release crime thriller from South Korea. Due to its excessively brutal crime scenes, the film was forced to be pulled from theaters 3 times. The shockingly realistic scenes of live dismemberment terrified countless moviegoers, prompting the director to cut 11 minutes of footage. Even after its release, the film faced significant backlash from Korean women. However, those who have seen the movie describe it as thrilling, primarily due to its highly satisfying ending. Hurry and watch it with your friends. The story unfolds on a snowy night. A woman's car breaks down, and she waits leisurely for help. Suddenly, a stranger appears and crazily smashes the car window with a hammer. The woman is terrified and tries desperately to escape, but unfortunately the car door is blocked by a fence. The man breaks into the car, knocks the woman unconscious with a hammer, and drags her to his house. When the woman regains consciousness, she finds herself in an unfamiliar environment. She pleads desperately with the man, revealing that she is pregnant, hoping he will spare her. However, she severely underestimates the man's twisted nature. The man didn't even think about it. He just cut her down. In the end, the woman was brutally murdered, and the man callously dismembered her. Several days later, the police discover her body in a river. Facing the tragic death of his fiancé, Joo-yeon, Soo Hyun is devastated. He swears by Joo-yeon's coffin to make the perpetrator suffer 1,000-fold for the pain inflicted upon her. Soon, Soo Hyun, a former special agent, seeks the help of his father-in-law, a 30-year veteran detective, and obtains detailed information about 4 potential suspects in Joo-yeon's murder. From that moment, Soo Hyun embarks on a path of revenge for his wife. Soo Hyun put all the photos of the 4 suspects on the wall. After sifting through them one by one, Soo Hyun went to the first suspect's house first. This suspect didn't kill Joo-yeon, but under Soo Hyun's violent pressure, he accidentally learned that this man was the murderer of 2 other female rapes and murders. So the furious Soo Hyun went straight for the hammer. Soo Hyun then found a second suspect, but he had already gone back to being a delivery boy and didn't kill his wife. Soo Hyun lets him off with a severe beating and moves on to investigate the third suspect, Kyung-chul. Unbeknownst to Soo Hyun, Kyung-chul is targeting his next victim at that very moment. Seeing that the other person was a school bus driver, the girl let her guard down and got into the bus. When they reach a secluded area, Kyung-chul reveals his true intentions. Kyung-chul took out a steel pipe from the back seat and hit the girl's head 3 times, knocking her unconscious. And the last thing that awaits the girl is a sharp guillotine. Once that was done, Kyung-chul he began skincare and playing the guitar with a twisted sense of satisfaction on his face. Unbeknownst to Kyung-chul, Soo Hyun had already disguised himself as an insurance agent and located Kyung-chul's parents in the countryside. Soo Hyun found out from Kyung-chul's parents where Kyung-chul lives now. Soo Hyun sneaks into Kyung-chul's room when he's not at home, rummages through the closet, and finds a lot of women's underwear and bags. At that moment, a secret door behind Soo Hyun suddenly opened, and when he entered, he was shocked by what he saw. The floor was stained with a plethora of blood and strands of female hair. Soo Hyun cautiously approached and astonishingly discovered Joo-yeon's wedding ring in the sewer. Soo Hyun was filled with grief. Soo Hyun could hardly fathom the inhuman torment Joo-yeon had endured in that place, the pain and fear she had suffered. Fortunately, Soo Hyun finally confirmed that Kyung-chul was the target of his revenge. Originally, Kyung-chul worked as a driver for a small car. Faced with a lone schoolgirl in the car, Kyung-chul once again has evil intentions and kidnaps the schoolgirl near his house. Just as Kyung-chul was about to start enjoying his prey, he suddenly heard a commotion outside, and he was immediately alerted. Kyung-chul grabbed a sickle and stared intently at the door. The next second, Soo Hyun pushed the door open and walked in.
क्या तुम अकेले हो?
Subsequently, Kyung-chul rushed towards Soo Hyun, but within a few moves, Soo Hyun managed to overpower Kyung-chul. When Soo Hyun was about to kill Kyung-chul with a stone, he thought it would be too cheap to finish him off. Soo Hyun decided to make Kyung-chul experience the same pain that Joo-yeon had endured before her death. Soo Hyun took out a GPS capsule and forced Kyung-chul to swallow it, then proceeded to break his hand. In the middle of the night, Kyung-chul woke up in pain and found an envelope full of money inexplicably on his body. Kyung-chul was puzzled and didn't know what the other party wanted. However, at that moment, Kyung-chul could only think about escaping from that place. He quickly took a taxi and arrived at a clinic to have his wrist examined. Upon seeing an attractive nurse, Kyung-chul's lecherous thoughts resurfaced, and he dragged the nurse into a room. Just as Kyung-chul was about to indulge in his desires, Soo-hyun appeared in time and knocked Kyung-chul down with a fire extinguisher. Kyung-chul picked up a surgical knife from the ground and tried to stab Soo-hyun, but he was no match for Soo-hyun and was subdued within a minute. Soo-hyun whispered something softly into his ear.
ये तो बस शुरुआत है, याद रखना, तुम्हारी जिंदगी और भी बदतर होने वाली है.
Then, Soo-hyun cut Kyung-chul's tendons and let him go once again, his attempts thwarted twice. With both arms and legs broken, Kyung-chul's hatred for Soo-hyun grew deep. Kyung-chul suspected that he was being tracked, but he couldn't find any trace of a tracker on his body or in his car. An angry Kyung-chul finds his former partner Tae-ju that night. Tae-ju was just as sick as Kyung-chul, if not crazier. Kyung-chul told Tae-ju about his series of encounters. Tae-ju analyzed that he must be a family member of one of the victims, otherwise he wouldn't be so crazy. At that moment, Kyung-chul remembered the ring on Soo-hyun's hand, and it all became clear to him. Subsequently, Tae-ju went to prepare breakfast for Kyung-chul the next day. He opened an iron gate and dragged out a young woman from behind it. The woman pleaded desperately, but Tae-ju ignored her pleas. Just as Tae-ju was about to make his move, Soo-hyun appeared before him like a grim reaper. Tae-ju smiled a mocking smile. He couldn't believe that this skinny man in front of him could have messed up Kyung-chul so badly. However, the moment Soo-hyun took action, Tae-ju realized he had encountered a tough adversary.
न कुछ ज्यादा, न कुछ कम, ठीक वैसे ही जैसे तुमने किया था. हाथ पैर और फिर से.
At that moment, Kyung-chul came to support him with a shotgun, but he didn't hit Soo-hyun even after firing several shots. Seizing the opportunity, Tae-ju managed to escape. Then Soo-hyun came to the second floor and got his weapon ready to attack again. Tae-ju suddenly lunged at Soo-hyun with a knife, but Soo-hyun swiftly subdued him, delivering a relentless beating until Tae-ju lay motionless. At that moment, Kyung-chul heard a noise on the second floor, so he came to the second floor with a shotgun, but accidentally stepped on the fishhooks that Soo-hyun had placed on the floor in advance. Kyung-chul winced in pain and collapsed to the ground. At that moment, Soo-hyun rushed over and delivered a kick to Kyung-chul. The vengeful steel pipe rained blow after blow upon Kyung-chul's body. Soo-hyun is frantically venting his anger, and he doesn't stop until the pipe is beaten out of shape. The next day, Soo-hyun woke up in the hospital. His colleague visited and advised him to hand Kyung-chul over to the authorities. However, determined to avenge his wife, Soo-hyun firmly declined. Finally, the colleague brings up the GPS capsule, but Soo-hyun interrupts by raising his hand, pulling back the curtain. Soo-hyun was relieved to see Kyung-chul still unconscious. Unbeknownst to Soo-hyun, Kyung-chul had regained consciousness and overheard the discussion about the GPS tracker. Shortly after, Kyung-chul woke up under a bridge. From this moment on, Kyung-chul's revenge begins. Kyung-chul first went to a pharmacy and purchased a large quantity of laxatives, expelling the GPS capsule from his body. As he looked at the GPS capsule, Kyung-chul was reminded of the torment inflicted upon him by Soo-hyun. His teeth ground together in hatred. As Kyung-chul was leaving, he ran into a driver. A sinister idea formed in his mind. To divert Soo-hyun's suspicion, Kyung-chul knocks the driver unconscious and feeds him the GPS capsule. Kyung-chul's first step towards revenge was to find Soo-hyun's father-in-law. But when Soo-hyun finally located the GPS capsule's position, he discovered the unconscious driver too late. Kyung-chul had vanished. In desperation, Soo-hyun turned to the hospital to interrogate Tae-ju about Kyung-chul's whereabouts.
तुमने बहुत गलत बंदे से पंगा ले लिया है. सुनो, हमेशा शिकार करता है हमारी लड़की.
In the end, Soo-hyun was so angry that she tore Tae-ju's mouth off. Meanwhile, Kyung-chul had already reached Soo-hyun's father-in-law's home. Father-in-law beaten beyond recognition, but what's worse is that Ju-yeon's sister just came back from outside. By the time Soo-hyun reached the scene, he found his father-in-law barely clinging to life. Ju-yeon's sister had suffered a heinous fate, raped and murdered, her body discarded in a dumpster, and just at that moment, Kyung-chul called Soo-hyun.
तो अब कैसा लग रहा है तुम्हें? तुमने मुझकी सजा मिल रही है तुम्हें. तुम्हें अब भी लगता है कि तुम जीते?
Kyung-chul was planning to turn himself into the authorities because there is no death penalty in South Korea. As long as he confessed, he could peacefully spend the rest of his life in prison. However, Soo-hyun, burdened by the pain of losing his wife, wouldn't let Kyung-chul have his way. In full view of everyone, Soo-hyun skillfully maneuvered his car in a drift and abducted Kyung-chul. Soo-hyun takes Kyung-chul to the place where Ju-yeon died, and he will make sure that Kyung-chul dies in pain and fear. Soo-hyun subjected Kyung-chul to a series of tortures. However, Kyung-chul claimed he didn't even know the meaning of fear. Subsequently, Suhayan tied a rope to the door, attaching one end to a guillotine blade and having Kyungchul bite onto the other end. As soon as Kayatetsu opens his mouth or the door opens, the knife will immediately fall. Afterward, Suhayan contacted Kyungchul's parents and son before leaving the scene. Soon after, Kyungchul heard his parents' and son's calls outside the door, and he was completely terrified. He desperately bit out the rope and screamed not to open the door, but his parents, worried about Kyungchul, finally opened the door. Thus the devil ended his life of evil. Suhayan was listening to Kyungchul's screams with his headphones on. He had finally achieved his revenge, but then Suhayan cried out in grief. What did his crying signify? Was it relief after avenging his wife's death? Regret for the fate of his father-in-law and Juyun's sister? Or the desolation of inadvertently becoming a demon himself? We cannot be certain, but what we do know is that when you gaze into the abyss also gazes into you. Until next time.